May 8, 1945, Camp Concordia, Kansas. Obergefreiter Wilhelm Schultz stood on a weighing scale in the camp infirmary, watching the American medic adjust the counterweight. The medic marked something on a clipboard and shook his head in amazement. 196 pounds, the medic said in broken German. When you arrived 8 months ago, you weighed 154 pounds. You've gained 42 pounds. Schultz looked down at himself. His uniform, the same one he'd been captured in near the Rhine, no longer fit properly. The trousers were tight, the tunic buttons strained. He had gained weight, substantial weight, as a prisoner of war. That same day, 4,000 miles east in Berlin, Gefreiter Hans Müller of the Wehrmacht's 9th Army weighed approximately 110 pounds. Before the war, he had weighed 165 pounds. He was literally starving to death in the ruins of Germany's capital, surviving on watery soup and moldy bread when he could find it. 2 German soldiers, one a prisoner in America, well-fed and gaining weight. The other fighting for Germany, dying of starvation. This is the story of how American abundance, even extended to enemy prisoners, exceeded Germany's ability to feed its own soldiers. This is the story of 425,000 German POWs in American camps who ate better than most Americans, while Wehrmacht soldiers on the front lines received rations insufficient to sustain life. This is the story of the ultimate contrast between American industrial capacity and German collapse. The Geneva Convention of 1929 required that prisoners of war receive the same rations as the captor nation's garrison troops. The United States took this requirement literally. German POWs in America ate the same meals as American soldiers stationed stateside, meals that included meat, fresh vegetables, bread, butter, and dessert. Meanwhile, German soldiers in 1945 were receiving 1,100 calories per day when rations arrived at all. The minimum to sustain an active adult is approximately 2,500 calories. Wehrmacht soldiers were slowly starving while their captured comrades thrived in American captivity. This wasn't propaganda. This was mathematics, logistics, and the fundamental difference between American abundance and German scarcity. June 1944. The first German POWs arrive in America. When the first German prisoners captured in Normandy arrived at American processing centers in June 1944, many were in poor physical condition. Months or years of inadequate German rations, combined with the stress of combat and the chaos of capture, had left them thin, exhausted, and malnourished. Private Werner Burkert, captured near Cherbourg on June 26th, weighed 141 pounds at 5 feet 10 inches tall when processed at Camp Shanks, New York. He was 23 years old but looked older, his cheeks hollow, his uniform hanging loose on his frame. The American processing officers noted his condition but followed standard procedure: medical examination, delousing, clean uniform, and assignment to a permanent camp. Within a week, Burkert was on a train to Camp McCain, Mississippi. What happened next shocked him. His first meal in the camp mess hall included roast beef, mashed potatoes, green beans, white bread with butter, milk, and apple pie for dessert. Burkert stared at the tray, certain there had been a mistake. This was more food than he'd seen in a single meal in over a year of military service. "Is this for me?" he asked the American mess sergeant in halting English. The sergeant, a Polish-American from Chicago who spoke some German, laughed. "Yeah, it's for you. Geneva Convention says you eat what we eat. This is what American soldiers eat. Welcome to America, Fritz." Burkert ate slowly, his stomach unaccustomed to such quantities. He couldn't finish the entire meal. But he saved the apple pie, wrapping it carefully to eat later, convinced such abundance couldn't possibly continue. It did. Every day. 3 meals a day. For the next 11 months until the war ended. By May 1945, Werner Burkert weighed 178 pounds. He had gained 37 pounds as a prisoner of war, the Geneva Convention requirements. The Third Geneva Convention, signed in 1929, established rules for treatment of prisoners of war. Article 11 specifically addressed food. The food ration of prisoners of war shall be equivalent in quantity and quality to that of the depot troops. Depot troops meant garrison soldiers, those stationed at bases rather than combat troops. The idea was that POWs should receive adequate nutrition, but not necessarily the enhanced rations given to soldiers in active combat. The United States interpreted this requirement generously. American depot troops received approximately 4,000 calories daily, well above minimum requirements and including substantial amounts of meat, dairy, fresh vegetables, and desserts. The U.S. Army Quartermaster Corps provided identical rations to POW camps. This created a surreal situation. German prisoners in America were eating better than American civilians who faced rationing of meat, butter, sugar, and other items. German POWs received steaks, roasts, fresh eggs, milk, and butter that were unavailable or strictly rationed for American citizens. This caused resentment among some Americans, particularly those with relatives fighting overseas or those who had lost family members in combat. Letters to newspapers complained about coddling German prisoners while American families sacrificed. But the US government maintained the policy for 3 reasons. First, the Geneva Convention required it, and America took its treaty obligations seriously. Second, reciprocity. The better America treated German POWs, the more leverage it had to demand better treatment for American POWs in German camps. Third, pragmatism. Well-fed prisoners were healthier, more cooperative, and provided valuable labor for American agriculture and industry, which faced severe labor shortages. The result was one of the war's strangest ironies. German soldiers captured by Americans immediately began eating better than they had while fighting for Germany. Camp life, abundance in captivity. By late 1944, over 425,000 German POWs were held in approximately 700 camps across the United States. The camps varied in size, from small work camps housing a few dozen men to large compounds like Camp Concordia, Kansas, which held over 4,000 prisoners. The daily routine was structured but not harsh. Prisoners woke at 600, ate breakfast at 700, performed work details or maintenance tasks during the day, had lunch at 1200, continued work until 1700, ate dinner at 1800, and had free time until lights out at 2200. The meals were substantial. A typical day's menu might include breakfast, oatmeal with milk and sugar, scrambled eggs, bacon, toast with butter and jam, coffee. Lunch, vegetable soup, roast pork, potatoes, bread, fruit. Dinner, beef stew, noodles, salad, bread, cake or pie, milk. This wasn't propaganda or exaggeration. These were the actual menus provided by U.S. Army Quartermaster records. German POWs received approximately 3,500–4,000 calories daily, matching American depot troops. Compare this to German civilian rations in 1945, approximately 1,000–2,500 calories daily when available, consisting primarily of bread, potatoes, and occasional thin soup. German soldiers at the front received marginally more when supplies reached them, but food distribution was collapsing as Allied forces advanced and German logistics disintegrated. Feldwebel Otto Strauss, captured in the Ardennes in January 1945, later recalled his first month at Camp Forest, Tennessee. "We couldn't believe the food. Meat every day, real coffee, not the substitute we'd had in Germany, fresh bread, butter. We thought it must be propaganda that they were feeding us well initially to soften us for interrogation. But it continued. Every day, I gained 15 kilograms in 3 months. Special occasions were even more lavish. On Thanksgiving 1944, German POWs at camps across America received turkey, mashed potatoes, gravy, stuffing, cranberry sauce, vegetables, rolls, and pumpkin pie. The traditional American Thanksgiving meal. Some prisoners thought it was a trick or didn't understand the American holiday. But camp commanders insisted Geneva Convention required equal treatment, and American soldiers were getting turkey for Thanksgiving, so POWs got turkey too. Christmas 1944 was similar. German POWs received special holiday meals, while German soldiers fighting in the Ardennes offensive were surviving on whatever rations their collapsing logistics could deliver. The contrast with Germany: starvation in uniform. While German POWs thrived in American captivity, Wehrmacht soldiers were slowly starving. German military rations had been adequate in the early war years. In 1940-1941, German soldiers received approximately 3,000 calories daily, including meat, bread, butter, and vegetables. But as the war dragged on and German-occupied territories were liberated, food supplies dwindled. By 1944, official German rations for frontline troops had dropped to approximately 2,000 calories daily. But official rations and actual rations were different things. Transportation chaos, Allied bombing, and the general collapse of German logistics meant that soldiers often received far less than official allocations. Gefreiter Hans Müller, fighting in the defense of Berlin in April 1945, later described his rations. "We received soup once a day if we were lucky." The soup was water with a few pieces of turnip or potato, maybe a bit of horse meat if available. Bread was moldy and rationed to 200 grams daily. I was constantly hungry. My uniform hung on me like a tent. I could count my ribs. American military doctors who examined Wehrmacht prisoners captured in 1945 found widespread malnutrition. Many German soldiers weighed 15–20% less than healthy weight for their height and age. Vitamin deficiencies were common. Chronic hunger had become normal for German forces. Oberleutnant Karl Weber, commanding a Wehrmacht company in the Ruhr Pocket in April 1945, wrote in his diary, "The men are starving. Yesterday we received half rations, 100 grams of bread, watery soup with no meat, a piece of cheese the size of my thumb. This is supposed to sustain soldiers in combat. It's impossible. Men are weak, unable to march more than a few kilometers without rest. We found abandoned American rations after they withdrew from a position. The men devoured the food like animals. I cannot blame them." The contrast became even starker when German units surrendered to American forces. Within 24 hours of surrender, German soldiers who had been starving were eating American rations. The transformation was dramatic. Hauptmann Gustav Zimmermann surrendered his battalion near the Elbe River on April 26, 1945. His men had been on reduced rations for weeks, surviving on whatever they could scavenge. Within a day of American custody, his men received hot meals, bread, and coffee. "My soldiers thought they had died and gone to heaven," Zimmermann later said. "For weeks, they had been slowly starving. Now they were eating better than they had in years." Some men wept while eating their first American meal, not from sadness, but from the sheer relief of finally having enough food. The mathematical disparity. The numbers tell the story starkly. German POWs in American camps, average daily caloric intake, 3,500–4,000 calories. Typical weight gain during captivity, 25–45 pounds. Mortality rate from malnutrition, effectively zero. Quality of diet, meat, dairy, fresh vegetables, desserts. Consistency of food delivery, 3 meals daily, every day. Wehrmacht soldiers, Eastern Front, 1945. Average daily caloric intake, 1 to 100–2,500 calories when available. Typical weight loss during service, 20 to 40 pounds. Malnutrition widespread, contributing to mortality. Quality of diet, bread, potatoes, watery soup, occasional meat. Consistency, sporadic delivery, frequent missed meals. The disparity was so extreme that some historians have called it the war's greatest irony. being captured by Americans immediately improved a German soldier's nutrition and health prospects. American abundance versus German scarcity. The fundamental explanation for this disparity was simple. America had more food than it could consume, while Germany was starving. American agricultural production in 1944 reached record levels. Despite millions of men serving in the military, American farms produced 25% more wheat than pre-war, 30% more corn than pre-war, 40% more soybeans than pre-war, record livestock production. This abundance was achieved despite labor shortages through mechanization, improved farming techniques, and the use of POW labor in agriculture. Ironically, German POWs worked on American farms, producing food that fed other German POWs. Germany, by contrast, was experiencing severe food shortages. Allied bombing had disrupted transportation. Occupied territories that had provided food were liberated. Agricultural production dropped as men were conscripted and equipment diverted to military use. By 1945, German food production had fallen to approximately 60% of pre-war levels, while the population had actually increased due to refugees fleeing eastern territories. The German civilian population was receiving approximately 1,100 to 200 calories daily in 1945, well below subsistence levels. Wehrmacht soldiers received marginally more, but logistics collapse meant official rations often didn't reach frontline units. Meanwhile, America was producing so much food that it fed not only its own military and civilian population, but also 425,000 German POWs, 50,000 Italian POWs, substantial food aid to liberated Europe under UNRWA, Lend-Lease food shipments to Britain and Soviet Union. The abundance was so extreme that American agriculture faced a glut problem after the war ended. Liberation. The ultimate contrast. When American forces liberated concentration camps and POW camps in Germany in April and May 1945, the contrast between American and German treatment of prisoners became undeniable. At Buchenwald, American soldiers found prisoners who were literally walking skeletons, many weighing less than 80 pounds, dying of starvation and disease. The American response was immediate. Emergency rations, medical care, and eventually full meals, once the liberated prisoners' digestive systems could handle regular food. At the same time, German POWs who had been captured months earlier were thriving in American camps, many having gained 30-40 pounds during captivity. The photographs from this period tell the story without words. Images of emaciated concentration camp survivors next to images of healthy, well-fed German POWs in American camps. The contrast was so stark that some Americans questioned whether the Geneva Convention should have been applied so generously to Germans when Germany had treated prisoners so abominably. But the US government maintained its policy. Brigadier General Blackshear M. Bryan, commanding POW operations, stated, "We treat prisoners according to our standards, not theirs." The Geneva Convention is not conditional on reciprocity. We feed German prisoners because it's the right thing to do, not because Germany deserves it. May 1945. The war ends. When Germany surrendered on May 8, 1945, approximately 425,000 German POWs were in American camps. Over the following months, most were repatriated to Germany, though some remained in America until 1946 to complete agricultural work contracts. The returning POWs faced a country in ruins, experiencing severe food shortages and economic collapse. Many POWs who had gained 30-40 pounds in American captivity lost that weight within months of returning to Germany, as they faced the same starvation conditions other Germans endured during the occupation period. Werner Burkert, who had gained 37 pounds during his 11 months in American captivity, returned to Germany in January 1946. By April 1946, he had lost 28 pounds. his weight dropping back near his capture weight as he survived on minimal occupation period rations. In a 1952 interview, Burkert reflected on his experience. "The Americans treated us better than our own government ever did. As a soldier in the Wehrmacht, I was often hungry, cold, and inadequately supplied. As a prisoner in America, I was well fed, warm, and treated humanely. It was a strange war when capture improved your life." Post-war reflections. The treatment of German POWs in America became controversial in post-war years. Some argued that America had been too generous, that German prisoners enjoyed comfort while American POWs suffered in German camps. Others countered that America's adherence to the Geneva Convention represented the moral high ground and distinguished American values from Nazi brutality. The statistics support both arguments. Approximately 1% of German POWs in American custody died, primarily from accidents or pre-existing medical conditions. This was the lowest POW mortality rate of any belligerent nation in World War II. By contrast, approximately 3.5% of American POWs in German camps died, though this varied significantly by camp and circumstances. American POWs in German camps generally received inadequate rations and harsh treatment, though nothing approaching the brutality inflicted on Soviet POWs, of whom approximately 58% died in German captivity. The Geneva Convention had worked, but only in one direction. America honored its obligations even when Germany didn't reciprocate fully. Legacy. The story of German POWs gaining weight in American camps while Wehrmacht soldiers starved became a powerful symbol of American abundance versus German scarcity. It demonstrated that even during total war, America possessed resources so vast that it could feed its enemies better than they could feed themselves. This abundance wasn't accidental. It resulted from American agricultural productivity, industrial capacity, and logistics systems that functioned efficiently even under wartime stress. The same systems that kept 12 million American servicemen fed worldwide also fed 425,000 enemy prisoners better than their own country had fed them. The contrast also highlighted the fundamental difference between American and Nazi values. America adhered to international law and humanitarian standards even when its enemy didn't. German POWs received proper treatment not because Germany deserved reciprocity, but because America's moral framework required it. In the end, the story isn't really about food. It's about two different visions of civilization, one that starved its own soldiers while pursuing conquest, and one that fed its enemies while defending freedom. This outcome was never in doubt.